give up other things. Like, in my business, you have to give up a lot to get what you want.
Cher is 78. Let that sink in. 78 years old, and yet when she steps onto a stage or into a photo frame, jaws still drop like it's 1975. Her presence hasn't just endured, it's evolved, defied, and completely shattered every rule about aging in Hollywood. But this isn't just about looking good. This is about surviving everything the world threw at her and still showing up in heels, sequins, and raw power. From poverty-stricken beginnings to superstardom, from heart-shattering betrayals to internet-breaking comebacks, Cher has been called many things: icon, diva, legend, but today people are calling her something else: ageless. When a recent photo of her went viral, fans and critics alike were left speechless. How is she still doing this? And why does she look like time itself gave up on trying to catch her? Stay with us, because once you see her now, you won't believe your eyes. The voice that refused to stay silent. Before the glitter, the Grammy Awards, and the world tours, there was only a shy little girl with olive skin and heavy dreams too big for the walls around her. Born Sherilyn Sarkisian in the spring of 1946, she came into a world that didn't offer softness. Her mother, Georgia Holt, was a struggling actress and model with a voice of her own, and her father, a truck driver with a troubled soul, disappeared before Cher could even form the word father. There was no mansion, no safety net, just the echo of a girl trying to make sense of a world that often ignored her. She didn't speak much as a child, not because she didn't have things to say, but because no one seemed to listen. Her classmates teased her for her deep voice. Teachers misunderstood her silence as slow thinking. Even her reflection felt foreign. She once confessed that she never thought she was beautiful. Her dark features set her apart. Her deep voice, so unusual for a little girl, made her feel like she was built wrong. But buried under that self-doubt was a spark, a whisper that she was meant for more, even if no one around her could see it yet. Money was always tight. Georgia worked multiple jobs, sometimes leaving Cher with relatives or strangers while she chased acting roles that never came. They moved constantly. Schools changed, bedrooms shifted, roots never had time to grow. But somewhere along the way, Cher discovered the power of fantasy. She watched films like other girls played with dolls. She studied the way actresses carried themselves, how they moved, how they spoke, and most importantly, how they held attention. She began to imitate them in front of the mirror, practicing poses, perfecting expressions, learning the language of presence. Still, nothing came easy. Her voice, low and full even in her teens, did not match the image of the bubblegum pop girls dominating radio in the early 60s. When she sang, people didn't quite know what to make of it. It was raw, it was strange, but it was unforgettable. She could not hit the high notes like the others, so she leaned into the grit, into the mood, into the depth. Her voice was never meant to be pretty. It was meant to make you feel something. By the time she turned 16, she had dropped out of school and moved to Los Angeles, chasing a feeling she could not name but could not ignore. She had no plan, only a dream and a voice that refused to stay silent. That voice, once laughed at in schoolyards, would soon echo through arenas across the world. But at this point in the story, it was still just a whisper that would soon become a roar, because the world was not ready for Cher, and that was exactly why she would change it. From shy girl to superstar. That whisper from the mirror was still with her as she walked the streets of Los Angeles at 17. She was too young to rent an apartment, too poor to take classes, and too proud to go home. But Cher was never just looking for fame. She was chasing something deeper, a sense of belonging, a reason to believe her voice, her face, her very presence could matter in a world that had always told her otherwise. It was during this uncertain stretch of her life that she met Sonny Bono. He was in his late 20s, short, quirky, and full of ambition. At first, he was just another figure passing through her fragile dreamscape. But there was something about Sonny that felt solid, like gravity. He saw something in her that others had overlooked, not just her potential, but her pain. Not just her beauty, but the brilliance flickering just beneath the surface. Their bond formed quickly. Some called it strange. She was young and mysterious. He was older and grounded. But together they created a balance. She once said that he made her feel like she could walk into any room and belong there. Sonny started bringing her into recording studios, not as a star, not yet. She sang backup vocals, learning the rhythm of the music business from the shadows. But shadows never suited Cher. Her voice was too distinct to hide, her presence too magnetic to ignore. When Sonny finally convinced a label to let them record as a duo, magic happened. Their breakout hit, I Got You Babe, released in 1965, was not polished or slick. It was raw. It was real. It sounded like the very ache of young love carved into vinyl. The song shot to #1. Just like that, the girl who never felt seen became the face of a generation. With Sonny by her side, she exploded into fame. Television appearances, tours, screaming crowds. But while the world saw glitter and smiles, behind the scenes, Cher was learning to navigate a different storm. She was growing, fast and fiercely, and that growth did not always align with Sonny's vision. He was her partner, yes, but also her manager, and sometimes her cage. Still, she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she believed in loyalty. She believed in their dream, and for a while, it worked. The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour debuted in 1971, turning them into television royalty. Cher's sharp wit, exotic beauty, and undeniable presence made her more than a singer. She became an icon. Young girls copied her outfits. Women envied her poise. Men adored her. And yet, in the quiet spaces between applause, that same girl from the mirror looked back, wondering if this success was really hers or just borrowed from the man beside her. What the world did not know was that Cher was not just rising. She was also waiting for the moment she would break free, not from Sonny, but from the shadow of needing anyone to believe in her but herself. The fall, the divorce, and the woman the industry underestimated. For years, Cher stood beside Sonny, smiling for the cameras, performing the love story the world wanted to believe. But behind the rhinestones and rehearsed laughter, cracks had begun to form. She had outgrown the cage, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Cher had vision. She wanted to write, to act, to evolve. Sonny wanted to stay safe, stay in control. Their dream had become a business, and she was no longer a partner. She was a product. The girl he once lifted into the spotlight had become a woman, and she was done shrinking to fit beside him. In 1975, Cher filed for divorce. It was not just the end of a marriage, it was the end of an era. The world gasped. Headlines spun stories of betrayal and scandal, but none of them captured the truth. This was not a breakup, this was a rebirth. Still, the price of freedom was steep. Sonny had kept control over most of their assets, their contracts, their name. Cher walked away with her daughter and a mountain of debt. The woman who had lit up every television screen in America was suddenly alone, broke, and viewed as a has-been by an industry that had never really known her. Record labels turned their backs. Producers passed. Critics sharpened their knives. The same people who had once praised her poise now dismissed her as style without substance. But what they did not understand was that Cher was not afraid of falling. She had done it before. She had fallen as a child, as a teenager, as a nobody, and every time she had found her way back. This time would be no different. With nothing left to lose, she started over. She signed a new deal. She took control of her image. And slowly the world began to realize that Cher without Sonny was not less. She was more. In 1979, she released Take Me Home, embracing the disco craze with unapologetic confidence. The album went gold. The image shifted. The public blinked and began to see her not just as a survivor but as a force. But it was not just about music. She wanted more. She wanted roles that challenged her, scripts that cut deep. Hollywood laughed. They called her a singer trying to act, a celebrity chasing seriousness. She was not trained. She did not fit the mold, so they cast her aside. But Cher did not need permission. She auditioned. She studied. She proved herself in places no one thought to look. She was not asking for their approval anymore. She was daring them to keep doubting her, because Cher knew what they had forgotten. The voice they once overlooked had never gone silent. It had only been waiting. And now, it was about to speak louder than ever before. The woman the industry had underestimated was about to remind the world exactly who she was. How Cher conquered Hollywood without trying. The critics had written her off. The agents laughed behind closed doors. The casting directors barely looked up from their scripts. Cher was a pop star in their eyes, a glamorous distraction, not an actress, but they underestimated one crucial thing. She did not need their permission to prove them wrong. She needed only one opportunity, and when that door finally opened, she stepped through without hesitation. It started quietly. No fanfare, no red carpets, just a supporting role in Silkwood in 1983 alongside Meryl Streep. She played Dolly Pellicker, a blue-collar lesbian with haunted eyes and a voice like sandpaper, and Cher disappeared into her. There was no glitter, no lashes, just truth. The transformation was so startling that even her harshest critics could not look away. That performance earned her an Academy Award nomination. The industry was forced to take another look, but she was not finished. Mask followed in 1985. She portrayed Rusty Dennis, a tough motorcycle-riding mother with a broken past and a fragile son. The performance was raw, unfiltered, and painfully human. No longer was she the singer trying to act. She was an actress. And not just any actress. She was electric. Her eyes told stories no script could write. She wore pain like a second skin. People cried, people gasped, people apologized for ever doubting her. Then came Moonstruck, the role that would cement her name not just in music history but in cinematic legacy. As Loretta Castorini, Cher was radiant, complex, funny, and heartbreaking. She lit up the screen with a kind of magic that could not be faked. Her chemistry with Nicolas Cage was fire. Her timing was flawless. And when she slapped him and shouted, "Snap out of it," a star was reborn in a way no one saw coming. In 1988, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. When she walked onto that stage in a sheer, unforgettable Bob Mackie ensemble, she was not just claiming a trophy. She was claiming her place in a world that once shut her out. What made it more remarkable was that she did not play it safe. She did not chase beauty or perfection. She chose roles that were gritty, messy, full of contradiction. She chased truth, even when it made her look unpolished. Because for Cher, the real power was never in being liked, it was in being unforgettable. By the end of the decade, she had done the impossible. She had conquered music, television, and now film. Not with connections or convention, but with the same force that had driven her since she was a child. Willpower, grit, and a voice that no one could silence. Hollywood had finally seen what she knew all along. She did not need to belong to their world to dominate it. She just needed them to stop looking away. And now, no one could look away again. The fashion rebel who never apologized. Fresh off her Oscar win, Cher could have done what most Hollywood stars did: play the role, fit the mold, blend in. But Cher was never built for blending. If the film world thought they finally understood her, they were wrong. Because while her acting had earned their respect, her fashion would soon remind them that she did not follow the rules. She rewrote them. In a world where red carpet glamour meant safe gowns and quiet elegance, Cher arrived like a supernova. Sequins, feathers, exposed skin, and headdresses that belonged in dreams, not ballrooms. She was not dressing to be accepted. She was dressing to be remembered. Her partnership with designer Bob Mackie was not just collaboration, it was alchemy. Together they created moments that froze time. When Cher walked the red carpet in 1986 wearing a black-feathered showgirl-inspired outfit, complete with a towering headpiece and bare midriff, the industry gasped. Some called it vulgar, some called it brilliant. Cher called it freedom. That look was not about shock, it was about reclaiming her image. She was saying, "I will not shrink, I will not age quietly, I will not become invisible just because you expect me to." It was not just award shows. Every stage performance was a visual rebellion. Fishnet bodysuits, glittering capes, thigh-high boots. She turned concerts into catwalks and talk show appearances into statements, and the public could not look away. Fans adored her. Designers worshipped her. Critics tried to make sense of her, but she refused to be explained. She once said, "I have always been Cher. I just finally had the wardrobe to match." But fashion, for her, was never just about beauty. It was about power. As a woman in a youth-obsessed industry, she understood what it meant to age under a spotlight. She knew the knives that came for women who refused to fade. So instead of hiding, she turned herself into living art. She dared people to see her, and when they tried to mock her for dressing too young or showing too much, she laughed. Because she was not dressing for them. She was dressing for the girl inside her who once thought she was invisible. There was always something deeper behind the rhinestones, a kind of defiance wrapped in velvet. Her fashion said what her lyrics and scripts could not, that women do not expire, that creativity does not have a shelf life, that beauty is not something you owe the world. It is something you define for yourself. By the time the 90s arrived, Cher had already lived a dozen lives, but her style had never wavered. If anything, it grew bolder. She walked into every room like a question no one knew how to answer, and in doing so, she became more than an icon. She became a movement, one outfit at a time, one glare at a time, one unapologetic, unforgettable entrance at a time. Reinvention queen, from disco to auto-tune. As the feathers settled and the flashbulbs dimmed, most artists would have clung to their greatest hits, afraid to chase the unfamiliar, but Cher had never feared change. In fact, she lived for it. While others begged the world to remember them as they were, she kept moving forward, constantly evolving into something no one expected. The world saw the costumes, they saw the glamour, but beneath it all was a master of reinvention. Not calculated, not rehearsed, pure instinct. She did not follow trends. She broke them and then built new ones in their place. The 80s gave her a platform. The 90s dared her to hold it. Pop was shifting. Grunge was rising. Female singers were getting younger, flashier, louder. But Cher had no interest in competing. She had something else, a sound no one saw coming. In 1998, at 52 years old, when most artists were being quietly retired or recycled into nostalgia tours, Cher dropped a song that would redefine the entire music industry. Believe was a dance anthem, yes, but it was also a revolution. It was the first mainstream track to use auto-tune not to correct, but to transform. Her voice bent and echoed, not hiding its flaws but sharpening them into something futuristic. That robotic shimmer became a signature. It was unexpected. It was addictive. It was genius. The song exploded. Clubs played it. Radios could not get enough. It hit #1 in over 20 countries. It sold over 10 million copies. Cher, once the queen of 60s folk, once the goddess of 70s glam, once the powerhouse of 80s cinema, was now the voice of a new digital age. And she did it without apologizing for her age, her sound, or her past. She walked into a room full of 20-year-olds and took the crown without even asking. What made Believe more than a hit was what it symbolized. It told every woman who had been told to step aside that there was no expiration date on relevance. It told every artist afraid of change that reinvention was not weakness. It was the secret. Cher did not erase her past to become someone new. She brought it with her. The heartbreak, the glitter, the fire, the scars. It was all there, humming beneath every note. She followed Believe with more dance hits, more tours, more dazzling performances that left audiences stunned. But no matter how bright the lights, she remained grounded in something deeper. Reinvention for Cher was never about hiding, it was about revealing. Each new version of herself peeled back a layer. The real woman was not disappearing, she was emerging, louder, braver, unstoppable. And by the time the millennium arrived, one truth was clear. Cher was not a relic, she was a blueprint, a reminder that when the world tries to close the door, you do not knock, you kick it wide open, walk through in thigh-high boots, and make sure they never forget your name. Tragedy, loss, and the woman behind the armor. After the world danced to Believe and the lights faded from her global tour, Cher stood on stage in silence. She had defied time, she had broken records, she had silenced the industry. But offstage, something heavier lingered. There were no costumes for grief, no glitter that could shield a mother from pain, no auto-tune for heartache. Beneath the sequins and the spectacle, Cher was still human, and that humanity, raw and quiet, had weathered more than most ever knew. Her life had always been touched by loss, some early, some sudden, all unforgettable. She had watched friends fall to addiction. She had seen lovers turn to ghosts. Fame never protected her from funerals. If anything, it made them lonelier. Every tragedy played out in public, every tear dissected in headlines. And through it all, she kept performing. Not out of denial, but out of duty. Music was not her mask, it was her medicine. But nothing prepared her for the quiet war inside her family. Her bond with Chaz, her child who transitioned publicly, was one of the most visible and complicated chapters of her life. She struggled at first, not out of judgment but fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of losing connection. She was honest about her confusion, even when the world demanded perfection. And that honesty was what saved their relationship. They fought, they cried, they rebuilt. In interviews, her voice would sometimes crack when she spoke of Chaz, not out of shame, out of love, real, flawed, relentless love. She also endured heartbreaks the public never truly understood. Some relationships ended in flames, others faded like whispers. She lost Sonny in a skiing accident in 1998. Despite their painful past, his death hit her like a wave she never saw coming. He had been her first partner in everything, in music, in fame, in survival, and now he was gone. Just like that, she spoke at his funeral. She trembled, she laughed, she wept, and she reminded the world that behind every headline was a heart still breaking. Through the years, Cher carried her grief quietly. She did not retreat. She simply moved forward, carrying the weight. Every performance, every album, every interview, you could see it in her eyes. A flash of sorrow, a flicker of resilience. She once said, "I do not forget, I just go on." And somehow that became her magic. She did not pretend to be untouchable. She simply refused to be undone. What made Cher more than an icon was not her fashion or her music. It was the way she stood in the middle of loss and refused to collapse. She wore her pain like armor, not to hide behind, but to walk through fire without flinching. She had lived through enough to disappear. Instead, she showed up again and again, singing through the heartbreak, surviving on sheer will. And every time the world thought it had seen her final act, she returned with something stronger, something real, something only pain could shape. Plastic surgery, public scrutiny, and the price of staying young. She had already conquered music, film, fashion, and reinvention. She had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and loss. But one battle never seemed to end. The world would not stop talking about her face, as if her body did not belong to her, as if aging for Cher was not allowed. The same media that praised her resilience now circled like vultures, dissecting her every wrinkle, every lift, every line. They asked if her beauty was real, they asked if she was still natural, but they never asked how it felt to be immortalized and yet criticized for staying visible. Cher never denied having work done. She never pretended to wake up flawless. When asked about plastic surgery, she met the question head-on. "Of course I have had it," she said once. "Who cares? It is my body. It is my business." She said it with the same fire she had used to sing through pain and walk red carpets in armor. Because for her, the real crime was not getting older. The crime was pretending it did not matter. She watched men in the industry age into wisdom while women were erased. She watched as leading ladies were replaced by actresses half their age, while male co-stars stayed the same. She understood the rules, but she never agreed with them. So she wrote her own. She would not fade into the background. She would not dress down to be palatable. She would not age quietly just to soothe the discomfort of others. She would age her way, even if that meant surgeries, even if it meant judgment, even if it meant standing alone in a crowd that pretended not to see her. There was something radical about the way she claimed her appearance, not with shame, but with ownership. Every change she made was a decision. Every procedure was a brushstroke on the canvas of her becoming. She was not hiding, she was sculpting. And if the world could not handle that, it was never her problem to solve. But behind the confidence lived something deeper, a fear that all women carry in silence, the fear that time might make them invisible, the fear that love might not recognize them, the fear that worth is something youth defines. Cher was never immune to these fears. She just refused to surrender to them. She turned every whisper of scandal into a punchline. She wore the mockery like sequins. She said, "Yes, I have had surgery, and I look great." Because in a world where women are asked to disappear with grace, Cher did the opposite. She stayed, she stood, she sparkled, and she looked back at the world that tried to shame her and said, "You do not get to tell me how to exist. You do not get to decide when I am done." Her beauty was not just in her face, it was in her rebellion, and at 78, it was still blazing. Cher at 78, the photo that shook the internet. She had faced the critics. She had walked through fire. She had carved her own path through decades of change. But even Cher could not have predicted what would happen when a single photograph hit the internet. It was not a staged photo shoot. It was not a magazine cover. It was a candid moment, snapped on the street as she stepped out of a black SUV in New York City. The camera caught her mid-stride, hair flowing, skin glowing, dressed in sleek black leather and boots that would challenge women half her age. And within hours, the world had stopped breathing. The photo went viral in less than 24 hours. Headlines screamed in disbelief. Social media exploded. People could not believe what they were seeing, not because she looked young, not because she looked perfect, but because she looked powerful, unapologetically alive. At 78, Cher had done what most thought impossible. She had defied not just age, but gravity, culture, and every whispered rule about what a woman should be at her age. She did not look like a relic. She looked like a storm walking. Her presence in that photo was not about vanity. It was about legacy, about survival, about standing in the light after decades of being told to sit quietly in the shadows. People who had grown up with her music stared in awe. Young fans who barely knew her story stopped scrolling. That photo was not just viral, it was a cultural shift, a reminder that the rules never applied to her, and maybe, just maybe, they never had to apply to any of us. The image was everywhere. Morning shows debated it, magazines dissected it, celebrities reposted it, but Cher never commented. She did not need to. The picture spoke for itself. It was not a comeback, it was a coronation. The world was finally catching up to what she had always known. That aging is not the end of power. It is the beginning of something rare, something earned. For Cher, the photo was just another day. She had been dressing boldly for 60 years. She had walked through brighter lights and darker shadows, but for everyone else it was a gasp, a pause, a reckoning. Because in that single moment, the woman who had once been mocked for being too different, too loud, too much, had become the living proof that time does not erase greatness. It reveals it. She had once been the girl who felt invisible. Now she was the woman the world could not stop staring at, not out of curiosity, out of respect. Cher, at 78, was not a surprise to her. It was the reward for every moment she had chosen not to disappear. And in that image, with one look, she reminded everyone watching that beauty fades but presence does not, and hers was still blinding. Why Cher still matters more than just looks. The photo had gone viral, the world had gasped, but Cher did not pause to celebrate the attention. She had never built her legacy on image alone. The boots and leather, the sculpted cheekbones and iconic hair were only part of the story. What truly made her unforgettable was what pulsed beneath it all: voice, fire, purpose. At 78, Cher still mattered because she never stopped being relevant, not by chasing trends but by staying anchored to her truth. She did not ride the wave. She became the tide. In a culture obsessed with youth, where artists fade after one decade and opinions shift with every click, Cher remained. And not quietly. She still sold out tours, still released music, still walked onto stages with the same spine of steel she had carried since her teenage years. Her presence was not just nostalgic, it was necessary. Young artists referenced her, pop stars credited her, fashion houses continued to worship her. She was not just a symbol of the past, she was a blueprint for survival in an industry built to forget. But it was not only music and performance that kept her name alive. Cher used her platform for more than applause. She was vocal when it mattered most. She fought for LGBT rights long before it became popular. She stood up for the marginalized. She spoke out on politics, on justice, on humanity. Even when it cost her endorsements, even when people told her to stay silent, she never did. Her Twitter feed alone had become a battleground where she fought, not with insults, but with raw, unwavering truth. Her opinions were not always neat, they were not always polite, but they were always hers. And that honesty became a kind of modern rebellion. What made her matter even more was her refusal to become bitter. She had earned the right to be angry. She had lived through betrayal, criticism, ridicule, and loss, but she met it all with grace sharpened by wit. She never played the victim, she played the warrior. And yet, there was softness too, a tenderness in how she spoke of her mother, a vulnerability in her reflections on love, a deep compassion in her relationship with her fans. They did not just admire her, they trusted her. Cher had become more than a performer. She was a symbol of endurance, of choosing to rise when the world expected you to fall. Her beauty was striking, her voice unmistakable. But what kept people watching was her truth. Cher was proof that reinvention was not a strategy. It was survival. That relevance did not come from youth, but from voice. From standing in who you are, loudly, when the world prefers silence. At 78, she was not a legend looking back. She was a force still moving forward, unapologetic, unbothered, unstoppable. And that was why she still mattered. Not because of how she looked, but because of how she lived. The last diva standing. She had weathered generations like seasons. Each decade tried to outgrow her. Each trend tried to bury her. But Cher never stepped aside. She never faded quietly into the background of her own legacy. Instead, she stood taller, louder, more dazzling with time. In an era that recycles fame by the minute, she is one of the very few who never had to reinvent the idea of who she was. She simply refined it, sharpened it, made it brighter. As the music industry shifted from vinyl to streaming, Cher kept moving. As the world moved from television sets to phones, she still showed up. She did not chase relevance. Relevance clung to her. Younger stars came and went, their lights flickering after a few years. But Cher endured, not because she tried to be young, but because she never allowed time to define her limits. She called herself a diva, but not in the way the tabloids once twisted it. For her, diva meant power. It meant control. It meant knowing your worth and daring the world to meet you there. Behind the glitter and the fanfare, the stadiums and the applause, there remains something far more sacred, a discipline, a drive. Cher never stopped working. She trained, she rehearsed, she learned. Her concerts were not nostalgia acts. They were full-scale spectacles, built with the same energy she brought to stages in her 20s. Her voice still carried, not just in tone but in weight, because now every lyric came wrapped in decades of triumph and trauma. Every note held the ghosts of those who never made it and the hope of those who still could. And she never performed alone, not truly. On her shoulders stood every woman who had ever been told she was too old, too loud, too different. Cher carried them, sang for them, lived as proof that the end is never where they say it is. That is what made her more than a singer, more than an actress, more than a star. She became the last of a rare breed, a diva in the truest, most powerful sense. At 78, she is not clinging to the past. She is not asking to be remembered. She is still commanding the room, still laughing in the face of limitation, still walking through doors many thought she had no right to enter. And when she speaks, the world listens, not out of obligation, out of awe. The girl who once stood silent in the mirror now owns every reflection she casts. The woman who once walked through rejection now walks through thunderous applause. She is not a relic. She is a fire still burning. In a world that loves to forget, Cher remains unforgettable, the last diva standing. Not because others are gone, but because no one else ever stood quite like her. Cher is 78, and she is still standing taller than ever, not just as a singer or an actress or a fashion icon, but as a living embodiment of what it means to survive, to evolve, and to never apologize for who you are. She has walked through grief, through ridicule, through decades of cultural shifts, and come out shining brighter with every step. Her story is not just about fame, it is about fire. It is about choosing to be visible when the world tells you to disappear. So the next time someone mentions Cher, do not just think of the wigs or the gowns or the hits. Think of the courage. Think of the woman who refused to vanish. Think of the legend who turned survival into spectacle. At 78, Cher is not slowing down. She is reminding us all that some stars never burn out. They only burn brighter. What do you think? What will Beatrice do when the true paternity is revealed? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before you go, be sure to click on the video shown on your screen.